9-year-old girl shows up for job interview instead of her mom. When the CEO learns her mother's in the hospital, he goes pale and drops everything. My mom is in the hospital. Kennedy's voice cracked as she stood on tiptoes, barely able to see over the marble reception desk. Her small hands gripped the leather portfolio so tightly her knuckles had turned white. They took her in an ambulance this morning. She couldn't breathe right. The receptionist stared at the 9-year-old girl in the rain-dampened navy dress, her face a mixture of confusion and concern. "Sweetheart, that's very sad, but your mother needs to come to the interview herself. We can reschedule when she's feeling better." "She can't reschedule." Kennedy's green eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Our insurance ran out 3 weeks ago. We're going to lose our apartment next month." My mom worked on this presentation all night, even though she was sick, because she said this job could save us. She took a shaky breath. "So I came instead. I know it sounds crazy, but I promised her I wouldn't let her miss this chance." From across the lobby, a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit had stopped mid-stride. Griffin Caldwell, CEO of Apex Digital Solutions, watched this impossible scene unfold. And when the little girl said the words that would change 3 lives forever, he felt something crack open in his chest. Something he had sealed shut 7 years ago when he buried his fiancée and the daughter he never got to meet. "What's your name?" the man asked, his voice quieter than anyone had ever heard it. "Kennedy Brennan, sir." The girl turned to face him, and despite her fear, she looked him straight in the eye. "My mom taught me it's important to look people in the eyes when you speak to them." She extended her small hand formally. "Are you Mr. Caldwell?" He stared at her outstretched hand. At the courage it took for a 9-year-old to stand in this lobby and fight for her mother. At the desperation masked by determination. And he made a decision that would shatter every protocol he had ever established. "Come with me," he said, shaking her hand. "Let's hear what your mother prepared." This is the story of how a little girl's impossible bravery saved more than just her mother's job. It changed a broken man's heart, transformed an entire company, and started a revolution that would ripple through corporate America for years to come. But before we get there, before I tell you how this miracle unfolded, I need you to understand something. Kennedy Brennan should never have been in that building. What she did was reckless, terrifying, and completely unauthorized. And it was also the bravest thing Griffin Caldwell had ever witnessed. Before we dive deep into this incredible journey, do me a favor. If you believe in the power of courage, if you've ever had to be brave when you were absolutely terrified, hit that like button right now. And I want you to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, or just say I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. I love knowing that stories like this are reaching people all over the world, reminding us what's possible when we refuse to give up. Now let me take you back to where this really began. Not in that lobby, but in a small apartment at 3:47 in the morning, when a 9-year-old girl woke up and discovered her mother collapsed on the bathroom floor. Kennedy had always been a light sleeper. Her mother said it was because she'd been born 6 weeks premature, spending her first month in a NICU incubator where nurses checked on her every hour. Even now, years later, the slightest sound would pull her from sleep. So when she heard the thud from down the hallway, her eyes snapped open immediately. "Mom," she called into the darkness of her small bedroom. The walls were covered with drawings she'd made, straight-A report cards her mother had framed, and a calendar where they marked important days with smiley faces. Tomorrow's date, October 15th, had a gold star on it. Mom's big interview, Kennedy had written in careful letters. When there was no answer, Kennedy threw off her blankets and padded down the hallway in her bare feet. The apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms and a bathroom they could barely afford even before her mom lost her job. Every surface held evidence of their struggle. Medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter. An eviction notice on the refrigerator giving them until November 1st. Prescription bottles that were empty because they couldn't afford refills. "Mom." Kennedy pushed open the bathroom door and her heart stopped. Audrey Brennan was on the floor, one hand clutching the edge of the bathtub, her face pale and covered in sweat. Her breathing came in short, desperate gasps. "Baby," Audrey managed to whisper. "Call 911. Kennedy's hands shook as she grabbed her mother's phone from the counter. She had never called emergency services before, but she'd seen it on TV. She pressed the numbers, her whole body trembling. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm and professional. My mom can't breathe. Kennedy's voice was surprisingly steady, even though tears were streaming down her face. She's on the bathroom floor, and her lips look kind of blue, and I don't know what to do. The operator asked questions. Kennedy answered them all. Her mother's name, their address, whether her mom was conscious, whether she was on any medications. Kennedy knew all the answers because she had been managing her mother's medication schedule since she was 7 years old, ever since Audrey's cancer treatment had made her too foggy to remember which pills to take when. The ambulance is on its way, sweetie, the operator said. Is there another adult there with you? No, it's just us. Kennedy knelt beside her mother, holding her hand. My dad died when I was 4. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. Kennedy had unlocked the apartment door and turned on all the lights, just like the operator instructed. She had packed her mother's insurance card, except their insurance had expired 3 weeks ago when Audrey's COBRA benefits from her last job ran out. She had packed the medication list instead. Mrs. Brennan, can you tell me what happened? The paramedic was a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. Audrey tried to speak, but couldn't catch enough breath. She has a history of breast cancer, Kennedy said, her voice small but clear. She's been in remission for 3 years. But she's been really stressed because she lost her job, and we don't have insurance anymore, and there are all these bills, and she hasn't been sleeping, and Kennedy's composure finally cracked. Is she going to die? The paramedic's expression softened. We're going to take good care of her, honey. She looked at her partner. Possible cardiac episode. Let's get her loaded. Kennedy watched as they lifted her mother onto a stretcher. Audrey reached for her daughter's hand. Baby, listen to me. Audrey's voice was barely audible. Mrs. Yamamoto. Next door. Stay with her. I will, Kennedy promised. And call Mr. Caldwell's office. Audrey's eyes were desperate. Tell them I need to reschedule. The interview. 10:30. Please, Kennedy. It's important. I'll call them, Mom. I promise. The ambulance doors closed, taking her mother away into the pre-dawn darkness. Kennedy stood on the sidewalk in her pajamas, watching the red lights disappear around the corner. She was 9 years old, completely alone, and she had just made a promise she had no intention of keeping. Because Kennedy had a different plan. She went back into the apartment and looked at the calendar with the gold star. Her mother had been preparing for this interview for 2 weeks. Every night after Kennedy went to bed, Audrey worked on her presentation. Kennedy knew because she would wake up and see the lights still on in the living room, hear her mother muttering to herself as she perfected her slides, rehearsed her talking points, triple-checked her portfolio. This isn't just another interview. Kennedy had heard her mother tell Mrs. Yamamoto last week. Apex Digital Solutions is the best in the business. If I can get this job, we'll have health insurance again. Real health insurance. And the salary, it would change everything for us. Kennedy walked to her mother's bedroom and opened the closet. The navy dress with white flowers hung there, freshly pressed. Her mother had laid it out last night along with her white cardigan and her best shoes. Kennedy took the dress off the hanger and held it up. It was enormous on her, but she had her own navy dress. The one her mother had bought her for the 5th grade advancement ceremony last year. It didn't fit quite right anymore because Kennedy had grown, but it would have to do. She showered and brushed her teeth. She combed her dark auburn hair and pulled it into 2 neat braids, the way her mother always did for special occasions. She put on the navy dress and her white sneakers because she didn't have dress shoes. She packed her backpack with the leather portfolio her mother had prepared, making sure the resume was on top, the presentation USB drive in the front pocket, and all the certificates and recommendations carefully organized. At 6:30 in the morning, Kennedy locked the apartment door and walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. She had been practicing this route for a week, ever since her mother mentioned where the interview would be. Kennedy always prepared for important things. Her mother had taught her that. The bus ride downtown took 40 minutes. Kennedy sat with the portfolio on her lap, watching Seattle wake up around her. Business people in suits climbed on at each stop, checking their phones, drinking coffee from paper cups, existing in a world Kennedy was about to enter uninvited. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. What are you doing? A voice in her head kept asking. You're 9 years old. They're going to laugh at you. They're going to call the police. Your mom is going to be so angry. But another voice, quieter but stronger, said something else. Mom would show up for you no matter what. She always has. Now it's your turn to show up for her. Apex Digital Solutions occupied a gleaming tower in downtown Seattle, all glass and steel reaching toward the cloudy sky. Kennedy stood across the street, staring up at it. Rain had started to fall, light and misty, dampening her dress and making her braids frizz slightly. She looked down at herself. Rain-spotted navy dress. Worn white sneakers with a scuff on the left toe. A backpack that said property of Lincoln Elementary School on the strap. She looked exactly like what she was. A scared little girl who had no business being here. Kennedy closed her eyes and thought about her mother in that hospital bed, working so hard to breathe. She thought about the eviction notice on their refrigerator. She thought about how her mother never, ever gave up, even when her husband died, even when she got cancer, even when the whole world seemed determined to knock her down. Deep breaths. Kenny, she whispered to herself, using her mother's nickname for her. You can do this. She crossed the street and walked through the revolving doors into the lobby of Apex Digital Solutions. The interior was even more intimidating than the exterior. The floor was polished marble that reflected the ceiling lights. The walls were decorated with awards and magazine covers featuring a serious-looking man with dark hair and gray eyes. Everything was chrome and glass and expensive. People moved through the space with purpose and confidence, their shoes clicking against the marble, their voices low and professional. Kennedy approached the reception desk, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone in the lobby must be able to hear it. The woman behind the desk was typing on her computer, her fingernails perfectly manicured, her blonde hair styled in a sleek bun. Her nameplate read Patricia Morrison. "Excuse me," Kennedy said, standing on her tiptoes to see over the counter. Patricia looked up and did a double take. "Oh, hello, sweetheart." Her confusion was immediate. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" This was it. The moment of truth. Kennedy could still turn around. She could say she was lost, let this nice woman help her find a phone, call Mrs. Yamamoto, explain everything, reschedule the interview like her mother had asked. Instead, Kennedy straightened her shoulders the way her mother always did before important moments. "I'm not lost, ma'am. I have a 10:30 appointment with Mr. Griffin Caldwell. My mother is Audrey Brennan. She has an interview for the senior UX design position." Kennedy carefully placed the portfolio on the counter. "I'm here in her place." Patricia's perfectly groomed eyebrows rose toward her hairline. "I'm sorry, what?" "My mother has an interview this morning." Kennedy's voice wavered slightly, but she pushed forward. "She can't come. So I came instead." "Honey, that's not how interviews work." Patricia's tone was kind but firm. "Your mother needs to come herself, or we can reschedule when she's available." "She can't reschedule." Kennedy felt her eyes starting to burn with tears, but she blinked them back. "She's in the hospital. They took her in an ambulance this morning when she couldn't breathe right." Patricia's expression shifted to sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. But that means we definitely need to reschedule. Your mother can call us when she's feeling better and we'll arrange a new time." "You don't understand." Kennedy's careful composure was cracking. "Our insurance ran out 3 weeks ago. We're going to lose our apartment next month. My mom stayed up all night working on her presentation even though she was getting sick because she said this job could save us." She unzipped the portfolio with trembling hands. "I brought her resume and all her certificates. She's really, really good at her job. Please, we really need this." Patricia looked helpless. "I understand this is difficult, but there are procedures. I can't just let a child attend an interview in place of the candidate. It's just not possible." Several people in the lobby had started to notice the unusual conversation. A man in a business suit paused near the elevator bank, watching. Two women from the coffee station glanced over curiously. "Please," Kennedy whispered, and now the tears did fall, hot and fast down her cheeks. "Please, we don't have anyone else. It's just me and my mom. If she doesn't get this job, I don't know what's going to happen to us." And that's when Griffin Caldwell stepped forward. He had been on his way to a meeting on the 19th floor. He had 17 items on his agenda for the day. He had a quarterly presentation to the board at 2 o'clock that would determine the company's direction for the next fiscal year. He had absolutely no time for delays or distractions. But something about the small voice saying, "Please, we don't have anyone else," stopped him in his tracks. "Patricia, what's the situation here?" His voice carried across the lobby, deep and authoritative. The receptionist looked relieved to pass this problem to someone with more authority. "Mr. Caldwell, this little girl says she's here for the 10:30 interview in place of her mother. Her mother is Audrey Brennan, scheduled for the UX design position. Griffin approached the desk, and Kennedy turned to look at him. She had to tilt her head back to see his face. He was tall and imposing in his charcoal suit, his dark hair showing threads of silver at the temples, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. Everything about him screamed power and control. He was, Kennedy realized with sinking certainty, the man from the magazine covers on the wall, the CEO of the entire company. She had just crashed the CEO's day with her impossible request. "Young lady," Griffin said, his tone not unkind but certainly not warm. "What's your name?" "Kennedy Brennan, sir." Despite her fear, despite the tears on her cheeks, despite everything, Kennedy remembered what her mother had taught her. She looked him directly in the eye. "My mom taught me it's important to look people in the eyes when you speak to them." Something flickered across Griffin's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of something he couldn't quite name. "And where exactly is your mother, Kennedy?" "Seattle General Hospital." Kennedy's voice was steadier now. "She has pneumonia, the doctors think. Or maybe it's her heart. They were still doing tests when I left. But she's going to be okay. She has to be okay." Kennedy's hands twisted together. "I brought her resume and her presentation. She stayed up all night working on it before she got sick." Griffin glanced at his watch. A Rolex, Kennedy noticed. Probably worth more than a year of her mother's salary, if she even got the job. "This is highly irregular," he said. "I know, sir." Kennedy swallowed hard. "But my mom says sometimes you have to do irregular things to get irregular results. That's what innovation means." Griffin's eyebrows rose slightly. "Did she now?" "Yes, sir. She says that's what your company does. You innovate. You do things other people say are impossible." Kennedy took a breath. "So I thought maybe you'd understand why I had to come even though it's impossible." The lobby had gone very quiet. Everyone within earshot was watching this exchange. Patricia looked like she might faint from the sheer awkwardness of the situation. A security guard had started to approach, but Griffin held up one hand, stopping him. Griffin Caldwell stared at this 9-year-old girl in her too small dress and scuffed sneakers, holding a portfolio like a lifeline, looking at him with eyes that held more courage and desperation than most of his executives displayed in their entire careers. He thought about his calendar, packed with meetings and calls and decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. He thought about the board presentation, the quarterly numbers, the strategic initiatives he was supposed to be focused on. And then he thought about something else entirely. A memory he kept locked away. A woman he had loved. A daughter he had never gotten to meet. A loss that had turned him into exactly the kind of man who wouldn't normally spare 5 minutes for a child in his lobby. "Come with me, Kennedy Brennan," he said quietly. Patricia's mouth actually fell open. "Sir," she managed. "Your schedule, the board meeting prep, you have calls at 11. Reschedule them." Griffin's tone left no room for discussion. He looked at Kennedy. "Let's go hear what your mother prepared." Kennedy grabbed the portfolio with both hands, hardly daring to believe what was happening. "Really? Really?" Griffin gestured toward the elevator. "Though I should warn you, I've conducted thousands of interviews in my career. I have high standards. So does my mom," Kennedy said, falling into step beside him. "That's why she's so good at her job." As they walked toward the executive elevator, Kennedy heard the whispered conversations erupting behind them. Did he just, with a child, completely unprecedented, what is he thinking? But she didn't care about any of that. She had gotten through the door. Now she just had to figure out how to convince this powerful, intimidating man to hire her mother. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in polished steel and silence. Kennedy watched the numbers climb. 5th floor, 10th floor, 15th floor. Her reflection in the elevator wall showed a small girl with frizzy braids and a wrinkled dress standing next to a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Fortune magazine. "Mr. Caldwell," Kennedy said, breaking the silence. "Can I ask you something?" Griffin's eyes remained. On the ascending numbers. "You just crashed my morning schedule. I suppose you've earned a question. Do you have kids?" The question hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He saw flashes of memory. Madison's hand on her pregnant belly. The ultrasound photo of his daughter. The tiny coffin he'd had to choose. The funeral where he'd buried both of them, and the part of himself that knew how to feel. "No," he said finally, his voice rougher than before. "I don't." "Oh." Kennedy sensed she'd touched something painful. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be nosy. Mom says I ask too many questions sometimes." The elevator chimed as they reached the 23rd floor. Griffin stepped out into a hallway that screamed executive luxury. Thick carpet, original art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Seattle and Elliott Bay beyond. "This way," he said, leading Kennedy to a corner office with his name on the door. Kennedy walked into Griffin Caldwell's office and tried not to let her jaw drop. The space was enormous, bigger than her entire apartment. One wall was all windows, offering a panoramic view of the city and the water. The other walls displayed awards, framed magazine covers, and photos of Griffin shaking hands with people Kennedy vaguely recognized as important. The desk was a massive piece of dark wood that looked like it cost more than a car. "Have a seat," Griffin said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Kennedy climbed into the chair, which was so big her feet didn't touch the floor. She carefully placed the portfolio on her lap and tried to remember everything her mother had taught her about professional behavior. "Sit up straight. Don't fidget. Speak clearly. Make eye contact." Griffin settled into his own chair behind the desk and steepled his fingers, studying Kennedy with those sharp gray eyes. "So, Kennedy Brennan," he said, "tell me about your mother's qualifications." Kennedy opened the portfolio with the same care her mother had used when packing it. She pulled out the resume, printed on expensive paper that her mother had bought especially for this interview, even though they could barely afford groceries. "My mom has 12 years of UX design experience," Kennedy began, reading from the resume, but also explaining in her own words. "That means user experience design. She makes computer programs and apps easier for people to use, especially people with disabilities." Griffin's eyebrow raised slightly. "You know what UX design is?" "Mom explains her work to me," Kennedy said. "She says it helps her think when she talks about it. So I know a lot about accessibility standards and responsive design and stuff like that." She traced her finger down the resume. "She worked at TechFlow Solutions for 5 years, until they went bankrupt last month. Before that, she was at DataWise for 3 years and Creative Digital for 4 years. And her education? She has a master's degree in human-computer interaction from the University of Washington." Kennedy pulled out a certificate. "She graduated with honors. And she has a PMP certification, whatever that is. Project Management Professional," Griffin said automatically. "It's impressive. Mom's really smart," Kennedy said with obvious pride. "She's won 3 innovation awards." She pulled out more papers. "These are articles about projects she led. This one is about an app she designed for people with vision problems. It won something called the Accessibility Excellence Award." Griffin took the articles, scanning them with genuine interest. "Your mother's work is impressive," he acknowledged. "Why does she want to work at Apex?" Kennedy hesitated, then decided honesty was probably better than a polished corporate answer she didn't fully understand anyway. "Because we need the salary and the health insurance," she said bluntly. "And because Mom says your company does revolutionary work in accessibility design. She believes technology should work for everyone, not just people without disabilities." That's her whole thing. The directness caught Griffin off guard. Most candidates spent 10 minutes delivering rehearsed speeches about company culture and growth opportunities before they mentioned compensation. "Your mother prepared a presentation," he prompted. "Yes, sir." Kennedy pulled out a USB drive. "It's a redesigned proposal for your mobile apps interface. She worked on it until 3 in the morning, even though she was feeling sick. She knew this interview was important." Griffin accepted the drive, plugging it into his computer. Kennedy watched nervously as he opened the file and began clicking through the slides. She couldn't see the screen, but she could see his face. And what she saw there gave her hope. His expression shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise to something that looked like impressed. "This is very well done," he said after several minutes. "The accessibility audit is thorough, the proposed solutions are creative and practical, and the implementation timeline is realistic." He looked at Kennedy. "Did your mother create this alone?" Kennedy bit her lip. "Mostly. I helped with the colors on some of the slides because I know which ones are easier for people with colorblindness to see. Mom taught me about that. But all the ideas are hers." Griffin leaned back in his chair, processing this information. A brilliant designer. A child who understood accessibility design. A presentation that would put half his staff to shame. And a situation desperate enough that a 9-year-old had taken a bus downtown alone to save her mother's chance at employment. Kennedy, he said carefully. Who's taking care of you right now while your mother is in the hospital? Kennedy's fingers twisted together in her lap. Mrs. Yamamoto from our apartment building. She's really nice, but she's 76, and she doesn't speak much English. Mom asked me to stay with her. But you didn't. I was going to, Kennedy said quickly. But then I thought about how hard Mom worked on this presentation. And I thought about how we're going to lose our apartment if she doesn't get a job soon. And I thought about how she never gives up on me, even when things are really hard. She paused. So I couldn't give up on her. Where's your father, Kennedy? The question she'd been asked 1,000 times. The answer never got easier. He died when I was 4, she said, her voice going flat the way it always did when she talked about this. Car accident. A drunk driver. Mom says he was a good dad, but I don't remember him very much. It's just been me and Mom for a long time. Something in Griffin's chest twisted painfully. He looked at this child, so small in the oversized chair, carrying responsibilities no 9-year-old should bear. Managing medications. Navigating bus routes. Fighting for her mother's chance at survival. All alone. He thought about Madison. He thought about Sophia, the daughter who would have been 7 years old now if she'd lived. He thought about the walls he'd built around his heart to keep the grief from destroying him completely. And he made a decision that would change everything. One moment, he said, pressing his intercom. Rachel, I need you to cancel my morning meetings. All of them. His assistant's shocked voice crackled through the speaker. Sir, you have the board presentation prep at 11. The quarterly review at 1. The conference call with Tokyo at. Reschedule them, Griffin interrupted. All of them. And give me Dr. Sarah Chun at Seattle General Hospital. She's head of emergency medicine. I need to know the status of a patient named Audrey Brennan. Kennedy's eyes went wide. You're going to check on my mom? We are going to check on your mother, Griffin corrected, standing and reaching for his coat. Together. But what about your meetings? What about my mom's interview? Consider this part of the interview, Griffin said, though perhaps the most unconventional part I've ever conducted. Kennedy scrambled out of the chair, clutching the portfolio. Mr. Caldwell, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? Griffin paused at his office door, looking down at this brave, terrified child who had walked into his building and somehow cracked through defenses he'd thought were impenetrable. Because, he said quietly, someone was once kind to me when I desperately needed it. I'm simply passing that forward. What he didn't say, what he couldn't articulate even to himself, was that when he looked at Kennedy Brennan, he saw the daughter he'd lost. And when he thought about Audrey Brennan, struggling alone with medical bills and discrimination and impossible choices, he saw Madison, the woman he'd failed to protect, the woman whose struggles he'd been too absorbed in building his company to fully understand. This time he wouldn't fail. This time he would show up. As they walked to the elevator, Kennedy slipped her small hand into his. The gesture was so trusting, so natural, that Griffin froze. He couldn't remember the last time someone had held his hand. 7 years, maybe. Not since Madison. Slowly, carefully, his fingers closed around Kennedy's hand. Thank you, Kennedy whispered. Griffin couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. So he just squeezed her hand gently and led her toward the elevator, toward the hospital, toward a future none of them could have predicted. Behind them, Rachel stood at her desk, phone in hand, staring at the sight of Griffin Caldwell holding a child's hand and smiling. Actually smiling. She immediately called James Whitfield, the CFO and Griffin's oldest friend. James, she said when he picked up, you're not going to believe what just happened. The drive to Seattle General Hospital took 20 minutes through downtown Seattle traffic. Kennedy sat in the passenger seat of Griffin's car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than her mother would make in 5 years, even with a good job. The leather seats were soft, and the car was so quiet she could hear her own breathing. Have you eaten breakfast? Griffin asked, noticing Kennedy fidgeting with her backpack straps. Kennedy's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. I was too nervous to eat. Griffin pulled into a coffee shop drive-thru without asking, ordering a breakfast sandwich and orange juice for Kennedy, black coffee for himself. When he tried to hand her the food, Kennedy hesitated. We can't really afford, she began. It's my treat, Griffin interrupted. You can't negotiate job terms on an empty stomach. Kennedy accepted the sandwich gratefully, taking careful bites to avoid getting crumbs in his expensive car. As she ate, Griffin asked questions that seemed simple but revealed so much. How long have you been taking the bus alone? About a year, Kennedy said between bites. Mom taught me which routes are safe and how to check the schedule. I'm really responsible for my age. I can see that. What grade are you in? Fourth. I'm in the advanced reading group, and I'm really good at math. Her pride was evident. I want to be an engineer when I grow up. Or maybe a doctor. I haven't decided yet. Those are ambitious goals. Mom says I can do anything if I work hard enough. Kennedy's voice wavered slightly. She never gives up, even when things are really hard. When she had cancer 3 years ago, she still came to all my school events. She was bald from the chemotherapy and she was so tired all the time, but she never missed anything important to me. Griffin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Your mother had cancer? Breast cancer. She's been in remission for 3 years now, but the medical bills were really bad. That's why we don't have any savings. Kennedy said all of this matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. We had to sell our car to pay for the treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. That's why we take the bus everywhere. The casual mention of selling their car, of choosing between transportation and survival, made Griffin's chest ache. How many brilliant, qualified people were out there right now, drowning under medical debt and systematic discrimination, unable to catch a break. Your mother sounds like an extraordinary woman, he said. She is. Kennedy's smile was fierce with love. She's the strongest person I know. She never complains, even when I know she's scared or tired or sad. She just keeps going. She paused, then added quietly. That's why I had to come today. She would never quit on me. I couldn't quit on her. They pulled into the hospital parking lot. The building loomed ahead, all concrete and glass and the faint smell of antiseptic that permeated even the outside air. Kennedy's hand found Griffin's again as they walked toward the entrance, and this time he didn't hesitate before holding it. The emergency department receptionist looked up as they approached. Griffin's commanding presence and expensive suit immediately shifted her demeanor from routine to attentive. I'm looking for Audrey Brennan, Griffin said. She was brought in early this morning. And you are? Griffin Caldwell. This is her daughter, Kennedy. He handed over a business card. I'm her employer. The lie came smoothly, and Kennedy glanced up at him in surprise. But she said nothing, understanding somehow that this was the easiest way to get information. The receptionist checked her computer. She's been moved to room 847. 4th floor. Take the elevator on your left. Visiting hours technically don't start until 10, but she glanced at Griffin's business card again, her expression softening. I think we can make an exception. As they rode the elevator up, Kennedy asked quietly, You're not really her employer yet, are you? Not yet, Griffin agreed. But I intend to be, if she wants the position. Even though I crashed the interview instead of her? Especially because you crashed the interview. Griffin looked down at her. What you did today took remarkable courage, Kennedy. Your mother should be very proud. Kennedy's eyes filled with tears. I hope she's not mad at me. I was supposed to call and reschedule, but I was afraid if I did that, you'd hire someone else before she got better. There are probably a lot of people who want this job. There are, Griffin confirmed. But none of them impressed me quite like your mother's presentation. Or her representative. They found room 847 halfway down a busy corridor. Kennedy paused outside the door, suddenly nervous. What if she's really sick? What if? She couldn't finish the thought. Griffin knelt down to her level, something he never did, his expensive suit knees touching the hospital floor. Whatever we find in there, we'll handle it together. All right. Kennedy nodded, wiping her eyes. Together. They pushed open the door. Audrey Brennan was propped up in the hospital bed, and 4-line running into her left arm, oxygen monitor clipped to her finger. Her auburn hair, the same shade as Kennedy's, was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. But when she saw her daughter, her face transformed with a mixture of relief, confusion, and dawning horror. Kennedy? Her voice was hoarse. What are you? How did you? She stopped, her eyes moving to the tall man beside her daughter. Oh my God. You're Griffin Caldwell. Kennedy launched herself at the bed, careful to avoid the 4-line, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Mom, I'm sorry. I know you said to call and reschedule, but I couldn't. I just couldn't let you lose this chance. Audrey's arms wrapped around her daughter automatically, but her eyes remained fixed on Griffin. Mr. Caldwell, I am so incredibly sorry. I can't even imagine what Audrey struggled to find words adequate to the situation. What she did, Griffin said calmly, walking further into the room, was present your portfolio with remarkable professionalism and insight. She made quite an impression. Audrey's face flushed. That's very kind of you to say, but this is completely inappropriate. She looked down at Kennedy. Sweetheart, you can't just show up at someone's office and attend a job interview for me. That's not how this works. I know, but you worked so hard on the presentation, and we need this job, and I was scared. Kennedy's words tumbled over each other. I'm sorry, Mom. I know I should have just called like you said, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. The raw fear in her daughter's voice silenced Audrey's protests. She pulled Kennedy closer, meeting Griffin's eyes over her daughter's head. Her expression was a complicated mix of embarrassment, desperation, and fierce protectiveness. Mr. Caldwell, I don't know what to say. Your daughter mentioned you were at TechFlow Solutions before their closure, Griffin said, pulling a chair beside the bed and sitting down. His casual posture somehow made the situation feel less mortifying. 5 years, correct? Yes, Audrey said, still trying to process this surreal situation. I was their lead UX designer until the bankruptcy last month. And before that, 3 years at DataWise, for at Creative Digital. Audrey's professional instincts kicked in despite the hospital gown and 4-line. 12 years total in UX design, specializing in accessibility and inclusive interface development. Your portfolio is exceptional. Griffin's tone was genuinely impressed. The accessibility audit you prepared for our mobile app identified problems my own team missed. And your proposed solutions are both creative and feasible. Audrey blinked. You actually looked at my presentation? Kennedy provided a very thorough overview. Griffin's slight smile acknowledged the absurdity. Though I suspect I should review it again with you directly to ensure I understood all the nuances. Kennedy pulled back from her mother, hope lighting her tear-stained face. Does that mean you're going to interview Mom for real? It means, Griffin said, his eyes moving from Kennedy to Audrey, that I'm interested in discussing employment possibilities. Once your mother is feeling better. Audrey's hand trembled as she pushed hair back from her face. Mr. Caldwell, I appreciate your kindness more than I can express, but surely there are other candidates. Better candidates. People who don't have, she hesitated. My complicated situation. What situation is that? Griffin asked mildly. Being a single parent? Having medical history? Those aren't complications, Ms. Brennan. They're realities that good employers should accommodate, not penalize. Audrey's eyes widened slightly at his directness. I've reviewed dozens of applications for this position, Griffin continued. Your qualifications are exceptional. Your experience is exactly what we need. And your daughter's presentation of your work showed not only your professional excellence, but also your character. You've clearly raised a remarkable child while maintaining a high-level career. That speaks to organizational skills most executives would envy. Tears spilled down Audrey's cheeks. She'd been to 8 interviews in the past 2 months. 8 times sitting across from hiring managers who smiled politely while asking veiled questions about her availability, her support system, her commitment level. 8 times seeing the decision behind their eyes before the formal rejection email arrived days later. No one had ever called her situation an asset before. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll meet with me next Friday for a formal interview. Griffin's tone was professional but warm. By then you should be recovered enough to present your work yourself. Though I reserve the right to have Kennedy in the room as consultant. That earned a watery laugh from both Audrey and Kennedy. What's the prognosis? Griffin asked, nodding toward the medical equipment. If you do. And mind my asking. Stress-induced cardiac arrhythmia, Audrey said, her voice tight with the irony of it. My heart is structurally fine, but apparently months of financial stress and worry caused irregular heartbeat severe enough to require hospitalization. They want to keep me for 24 hours of monitoring. And the financial aspect of this hospitalization? Audrey's face went carefully blank. That's not your concern, Mr. Caldwell. Actually, Griffin pulled out his wallet and extracted 2 business cards. The first is my direct office line for scheduling your interview. The second, he held up a different card entirely, is for Apex's Medical Assistance Fund. Have the hospital billing department contact this number. We have resources for situations exactly like yours. Mr. Caldwell, I can't accept charity, Audrey protested. It's not charity. It's an advance on your benefits package. Griffin's tone left no room for argument. Apex takes care of its people, Ms. Brennan. We're simply starting a bit early. But I'm not even hired yet. You are, pending the formality of Friday's interview to discuss specifics of your role and compensation. Griffin stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Unless you're planning to withdraw from consideration? No, Audrey said quickly. No, of course not. I thank you. Thank you so much. Griffin turned to Kennedy. You ready to head back? I should probably return to the office before Rachel sends a search party. Kennedy hugged her mother one more time. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I scared you. You are so grounded, Audrey said, but her voice was thick with emotion and pride. Also, I love you more than anything in the world. You're the bravest person I know. I learned from you, Kennedy said simply. As Griffin and Kennedy prepared to leave, Audrey called out, Mr. Caldwell, why are you really doing this? Griffin paused in the doorway. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, because 7 years ago, someone I loved was in a situation similar to yours. Brilliant, qualified, and systematically rejected because she had a child and needed flexibility. I didn't understand then how wrong that was. He met Audrey's eyes. I understand now. Consider this my attempt at balance. He left before Audrey could respond, Kennedy's hand once again in his. In the car ride back to Apex, Kennedy was quieter than before, processing everything that had happened. Griffin let the silence stretch, giving her space. Finally, Kennedy said, Mr. Caldwell, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. The someone you loved who needed flexibility. Kennedy's voice was soft. Did she find a job? No, Griffin said, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. She didn't. And 7 years ago, she and our daughter died in a car accident. She was driving to yet another interview when it happened. Kennedy sucked in a breath. I'm so sorry. So am I, Kennedy. Griffin's voice was rough with old grief. So am I. That's why when I saw you in that lobby, fighting for your mother, I couldn't walk away. Because somewhere, somehow, maybe I can help your mother in ways I couldn't help mine. Tears streamed down Kennedy's face. She was going to be my age, wasn't she? Your daughter? She'd be 7 now, Griffin confirmed. Her name was Sophia. Your determination reminded me of what she might have become. They drove in silence for several minutes. Then Kennedy said something that nearly broke Griffin's careful composure. I think your daughter would be proud of you. For helping us. For being kind, even though it still hurts. Griffin had to pull over because his vision had blurred too much to drive safely. He sat in the parked car, this powerful CEO who hadn't cried in 7 years, and let the tears fall while a 9-year-old girl he'd met 3 hours ago held his hand and told him it was okay to be sad. You're going to be okay, Kennedy said, echoing the words countless people had said to her when her father died. It hurts for a long time, but then it starts to hurt a little less. That's what Mom told me. Your mother is very wise, Griffin managed. So are you, Kennedy said. Even if you are really sad sometimes. When Griffin finally composed himself enough to drive, he felt something shift inside his chest. The walls he'd built around his grief hadn't disappeared, but they had developed a crack. And through that crack, light was starting to filter in. He drove Kennedy back to Apex, helped her arrange a car service home with strict instructions that Mrs. Yamamoto be notified immediately, and gave her his personal cell phone number. If you or your mother need anything before Friday, you call me directly. Understand? Kennedy nodded, then surprised him by hugging him tightly. Thank you for seeing my mom. Thank you for not being mean about me coming. Thank you for being kind. Griffin's arms wrapped around her carefully. This child who had walked into his life and somehow started healing wounds he thought were permanent. Thank you for reminding me why kindness matters, he said quietly. As Kennedy left in the car service, Griffin returned to his office to find Rachel with a stack of messages and a knowing look on her face. The board meeting has been rescheduled for tomorrow, she informed him. Tokyo moved to Thursday, and James called 3 times asking what's going on. Tell James I'll explain at dinner tonight, Griffin said. And Rachel? Clear my schedule next Friday morning. I have an interview to conduct. Rachel smiled. Of course, sir. Anything else? Yes. I need you to research family-friendly workplace policies. Flexible hours, emergency childcare support, parental leave structures. Everything. Rachel's eyebrows rose. Sir, are we implementing new HR initiatives? We're about to, Griffin said. It's long overdue. As Rachel left to execute his requests, Griffin sat at his desk and looked out at the Seattle skyline. For 7 years, he'd built his life around achievement and isolation, around success and emotional protection. He'd told himself it was safer this way, easier. But Kennedy Brennan, in her too small dress and scuffed sneakers, carrying her mother's portfolio like hope itself, had shown him something different. Bravery wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about showing up anyway. And for the first time since losing Madison and Sophia, Griffin Caldwell was ready to show up. Now I know what you're thinking at this point. This sounds too good to be true, right? A CEO who actually cares? Who helps instead of dismissing? Well, stick around, because what I haven't told you yet is that this story is about to get complicated. Because corporate America doesn't change just because one man decides to be kind. And there were people at Apex Digital Solutions who were not happy about Griffin's sudden interest in the Harrison family. If this story is already hitting you right in the chest, if you're feeling that hope starting to build, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now because you're going to want to see how this unfolds. And drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, or just say I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. I want to know this message is reaching people who need to hear it. Because what happened over the next few weeks would test everyone involved. The courage that brought Kennedy to that lobby was just the beginning. The real challenge was about to start. Over the next 5 days, something extraordinary happened at Apex Digital Solutions. Kennedy Brennan became a regular fixture in the building, and nobody quite knew what to make of it. With Audrey still recovering at home, and Mrs. Yamamoto unable to provide full-time supervision, Griffin had arranged for Kennedy to spend her after-school hours at Apex. He'd set up a small desk in an empty office next to his suite, equipped with everything a 9-year-old might need. Books, art supplies, a tablet loaded with educational games, and a mini refrigerator stocked with healthy snacks and the chocolate milk that had quickly become their daily ritual. Rachel, Griffin's assistant, had become Kennedy's unofficial guardian during office hours. But what surprised everyone was how often Griffin himself would appear in Kennedy's temporary workspace, ostensibly checking on her, but really just enjoying her company. On Tuesday afternoon, Griffin stopped by to find Kennedy frowning at her math homework, her pencil tapping against the paper in frustration. "Problem?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Kennedy looked up. "Long division. I understand how it works, but I keep making little mistakes and getting the wrong answer." Griffin pulled up a chair beside her desk, something that would have shocked his executive team if they'd witnessed it. The CEO of Apex Digital Solutions didn't do homework help. Except apparently he did now. "Show me what you've got so far." Kennedy walked him through her work, and Griffin patiently pointed out where she'd carried a number incorrectly. As she worked through the correction, something occurred to her. "Mr. Caldwell, can I ask you a question about your company?" "Of course. Your mobile app has an accessibility problem." Kennedy pulled up Apex's app on her tablet. "The contrast ratio between your text and background doesn't meet WCAG standards. People with vision problems can't read it easily." Griffin leaned forward, studying the screen. "And you know this how?" "Mom taught me about WCAG. That's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. She says if you're designing something, you have to make sure everyone can use it, not just people with perfect vision and hearing and motor control." Kennedy tapped the screen. "See? This gray text on light blue background? The contrast is only about 3:1. It should be at least 4.5:1 for regular text." Griffin stared at this 9-year-old who was casually discussing technical standards his design team should have caught. "You're absolutely right. I'll have the team review it immediately." Kennedy beamed, revealing the gap where she'd recently lost a tooth. "Really? You'll actually change it?" "I don't ignore good feedback, regardless of the source's age." Griffin found himself smiling. "What else have you noticed?" "Well," Kennedy scrolled through the app, "your button placement is pretty good, but some of your icons don't have text labels. That's bad for people using screen readers. They won't know what the buttons do." Over the next 30 minutes, Kennedy provided a more thorough accessibility audit than most consultants could deliver. Griffin took notes, genuinely impressed. "Kennedy, has anyone ever told you that you'd make an excellent UX designer?" Kennedy's face lit up. "Like my mom?" "Exactly like your mom." Griffin hesitated, then added, "Has she always involved you in her work like this?" Kennedy's expression grew more serious. "Not always. But after Dad died, and then when Mom got cancer, She needed someone to talk to about her projects. She said it helped her think through problems. So she'd explain everything to me, and I'd ask questions, and pretty soon I just kind of understood how it all worked. The casual mention of cancer, of loss, of a child becoming her mother's sounding board through medical crisis, made Griffin's chest tight. Kennedy carried so much more than a 9-year-old should bear. Your mother is lucky to have you, he said quietly. I'm lucky to have her, Kennedy corrected. She never gave up, even when things got really scary. When she was doing chemotherapy, and she was so sick, she still read to me every night. Even when I could tell she was exhausted and felt terrible, she never broke her promise. What promise? That she'd always be there for me. Kennedy's eyes were serious beyond her years. That's why I had to go to the interview. Because she's always there for me. I had to be there for her. Griffin had to look away because the emotion in Kennedy's face was too much. This child's loyalty, her courage, her unwavering love for her mother, it reminded him of everything he'd lost and everything he'd stopped believing in. Mr. Caldwell? Kennedy's voice was soft. Did you have someone who was always there for you? Griffin thought about his parents, distant and focused on social status. His colleagues, loyal to power and position. Madison had been the only person who'd truly seen him, loved him for himself rather than his achievements. And she was gone. I did once, he said finally. She died 7 years ago. I remember. Kennedy's hand found his. Your fiancé and your daughter. I'm really sorry that happened to you. The simple compassion in her voice nearly undid him. Kennedy, he said carefully, what would you think if I told you that helping your mother wasn't just about being kind? What if I told you that you both reminded me of something I lost, and being around you makes me feel less lonely? Kennedy considered this with the seriousness she brought to difficult questions. I think that sounds like we're helping each other. You're helping Mom get a job, and me have somewhere safe to go after school. And maybe we're helping you remember how to be happy again. The perception was staggering. How did this child see so clearly what Griffin barely understood himself? You're very wise for 9 years old, he managed. Mom says hard things make you grow up faster than you should. Kennedy shrugged. But it's okay. I don't mind being wise if it means I can help people. That evening, Rachel found Griffin standing at his office window long after Kennedy had been driven home by the car service he'd arranged. She's getting to you, Rachel observed, not unkindly. Griffin didn't deny it. I've spent 7 years building walls. She walked right through them without even trying. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. Griffin's reflection in the glass looked uncertain. What if I let myself care, and something happens? What if I fail them the way I failed Madison? Rachel had worked with Griffin long enough to speak plainly. Or what if you succeed? What if this is your second chance? Griffin didn't answer. But for the first time in 7 years, he allowed himself to hope. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor to Apex Digital Solutions, and this one wouldn't be as welcome as Kennedy had been. Kennedy was in her office working on a science project, constructing a solar system model from foam balls and paint, when raised voices echoed down the hallway. She looked up, paint-stained fingers stilling on the Jupiter she'd been coating with orange and white swirls. Where is she? The male voice was angry, demanding. I know she's here. Where's Kennedy? Griffin emerged from his office, his expression shifting from curiosity to cold assessment as a man stormed toward the executive suite. The man was in his mid-30s, with brown hair and a face flushed red with fury. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, and everything about his body language screamed aggression. Can I help you? Griffin asked, his tone deceptively calm as he positioned himself in the hallway. Tucker Brennan. The man jabbed a finger toward Griffin. Audrey's brother-in-law. And you can help me by telling me where my niece is. I have legal custody papers, and I'm taking her with me right now. Griffin's eyes narrowed. I wasn't aware Kennedy had other family. That's because Audrey's been keeping her from me. Tucker pulled out his phone. Poisoning Kennedy against me since my brother died. But I've been fighting for custody for 2 years, and with Audrey's medical instability and unemployment, the court finally agreed to an emergency review. Behind Tucker, Rachel had quietly pressed the security alert button under her desk. Down the hall, Kennedy had heard her uncle's voice and frozen in terror. Does Audrey know about this emergency review? Griffin asked, his voice dropping several degrees in temperature. She will soon enough. Tucker's smile was ugly. I'm calling the police right now to report a kidnapping situation. Some CEO thinking he can just keep a child here without proper guardianship. That won't be necessary. The new voice came from the elevator bank. Audrey stepped out, pale but steady, with Kennedy's backpack slung over her shoulder. Rachel had called her the moment Tucker appeared in the lobby. Tucker. Audrey's voice was ice-cold despite her obvious weakness. She'd been released from the hospital just that morning. What are you doing here? Tucker's expression shifted to something crueler. You look terrible, Audrey. Which is exactly my point. You can't properly care for Kennedy. The court agrees. I'm here for my interview with Mr. Caldwell, Audrey said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Kennedy is here with my permission and his supervision. There's no kidnapping. Your interview? Tucker laughed harshly. You're unemployed, medically unstable, and clearly delusional if you think anyone's hiring you in this condition. The custody hearing is scheduled for next week, and I will prove you're an unfit mother. Kennedy had crept to her office doorway, paint still on her hands, tears streaming down her face. She'd had nightmares about this for months. About Uncle Tucker taking her away from her mom. About living in his house where she'd be alone and scared and away from the only person who loved her. Griffin saw Kennedy's face, and something dangerous settled into his expression. Mr. Brennan, he said quietly, I think you should leave my building. Now. Not without Kennedy. Tucker started down the hallway. I have legal documentation. Actually, a new voice interrupted from the elevator. You have fraudulent documentation. And we have proof. A woman in an elegant suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. Vanessa Ortiz, head of Apex's legal department, and one of the most respected family law attorneys in Washington before Griffin recruited her to corporate work. Who the hell are you? Tucker demanded. Vanessa Ortiz, legal counsel for Apex Digital Solutions. She opened her briefcase calmly. I've spent the past 3 days reviewing your custody petition at Mr. Caldwell's request. Would you like to know what I found? Griffin's slight smile was razor-sharp. Kennedy mentioned her uncle was causing problems during our conversation Tuesday. It seemed prudent to investigate. Tucker's face had gone white. You can't just investigate people. Public records are freely accessible, Vanessa said smoothly, as are court documents, arrest records, and medical files when properly subpoenaed. She pulled out a folder. Your petition contains fraudulent medical reports about MS. Brennan's cancer prognosis. The documents you submitted to the court claim she has 6 months to live. That's a lie, Audrey gasped. Yes, it is. Vanessa's voice was steel. Ms. Brennan's actual medical records, which she consented to share, show she's been in full remission for 3 years with excellent prognosis. You deliberately falsified medical documents to sway the court. I never, Tucker sputtered. Additionally, Vanessa continued relentlessly. You failed to disclose your DUI arrest from 6 months ago, or your assault charge from 2 years ago, which was dropped only because the victim declined to press charges. And most damningly, she held up bank statements. We have documentation showing you've been attempting to access the life insurance payout from your brother's death. The payout held in trust for Kennedy until she turns 18. The hallway had gone completely silent except for Kennedy's quiet crying. You want custody of Kennedy to access $300,000 in life insurance, Vanessa said flatly. That's not family concern, Mr. Brennan. That's attempted theft. This is ridiculous, Tucker said, but his bluster was weakening. You can't have gathered all this in 3 days. I've had it for 3 days, Vanessa corrected. I've been investigating for 2 weeks. Ms. Brennan contacted me when she received your custody notice. Mr. Caldwell simply expedited our timeline. Griffin had been quietly preparing for this confrontation since Tuesday, since Kennedy's casual mention of her uncle trying to take her away. He'd seen the fear in her eyes, the way she'd unconsciously moved closer to him when she talked about it. And he'd decided, with cold precision, to eliminate the threat. Get out of my building, Griffin said quietly to Tucker. And if you contact Kennedy or her mother again, Apex's legal team will ensure you're prosecuted for fraud, attempted theft, harassment, and any other charge we can make stick. He stepped closer. Are we absolutely clear? Tucker looked around the hallway. At Griffin's implacable expression. At Vanessa's folder of evidence. At Audrey's protective fury. At Kennedy's tear-stained face. And he realized he'd lost before the battle even started. This isn't over, he tried weakly. Yes, Vanessa said. It is. I've already submitted our findings to the court. Your custody petition has been dismissed and a restraining order is being issued. You're not to come within 500 feet of Kennedy or Ms. Brennan. Security appeared at the end of the hallway, summoned by Rachel's earlier alert. Tucker was escorted from the building, his threats fading as the elevator doors closed. The moment he was gone, Kennedy ran to her mother. Audrey caught her, sinking into a chair as her daughter buried her face in her neck and sobbed. "He wanted to take me away." Kennedy could barely speak through her tears. "He wanted to take me away from you." "Never," Audrey whispered fiercely, holding Kennedy so tightly it probably hurt. "Never, baby. I will never let anyone take you from me." Griffin knelt beside them, his hand gentle on Kennedy's back. "He's gone, sweetheart. He can't hurt you or your mother. I promise." Kennedy turned and threw her arms around Griffin's neck, clinging to him with the desperate trust of a child who'd been terrified and was now safe. Griffin held her carefully, this brave little girl who'd already survived so much. Over Kennedy's head, Audrey met Griffin's eyes. Her expression was complicated. Gratitude, confusion, something deeper she wasn't ready to acknowledge. "How?" she asked quietly. "How did you have all that ready?" "Kennedy told me Tuesday that her uncle was trying to take her away," Griffin said simply. "I asked Vanessa to look into it. When we found the fraud, I asked her to expedite the investigation." "You've been protecting us," Audrey said. "Since the moment Kennedy walked into your lobby, you've been protecting us." Griffin's hand continued stroking Kennedy's hair as her sobs gradually quieted. "I told you, Apex takes care of its people." He paused. "And you're not just employees to me. Not anymore." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to explore. Vanessa cleared her throat diplomatically. "I'll file the final paperwork with the court today. The restraining order should be official by tomorrow." She smiled at Kennedy. "You're safe now. Your uncle can't bother you again." Kennedy pulled back from Griffin, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. And thank you, Mr. Caldwell. I was so scared." "I know," Griffin said gently. "But you're safe now. Both of you." As Vanessa left and Rachel discreetly returned to her desk, giving them privacy, Audrey stood on shaky legs. Kennedy remained close, one hand gripping her mother's shirt. "Mr. Caldwell," Audrey began, "I don't know how to thank you." "Come to your interview Friday as planned," Griffin said. "Let's make this official. You've earned it. I haven't even properly presented my work yet. I've reviewed your presentation 3 times. Griffin's slight smile held warmth. "It's exceptional. Friday is really just a formality, and a chance for me to hear your vision directly instead of through your very capable representative." Kennedy managed a watery smile at that. "There's one more thing," Griffin said. He gestured to Kennedy's office down the hall, to the desk and supplies and evidence of a child being cared for. "I'm implementing a new program at Apex. On-site support for employees with children. Flexible work arrangements, emergency childcare resources, family-first policies." Audrey stared at him. "You're changing company policy. Because of us?" "I'm changing company policy because it's overdue," Griffin corrected. "But yes, you and Kennedy inspired me to see what's been missing." He met Audrey's eyes. Too many brilliant people are rejected from opportunities because they have families. Because employers see children as liabilities instead of evidence of strength. That ends at Apex. Tears streamed down Audrey's face. "Why are you doing this? All of this? We're strangers." "No," Griffin said softly. "You're not. Not anymore." The moment stretched between them, something shifting and settling into place. Something that felt like the beginning of family. That evening, Kennedy fell asleep on Audrey's couch at home, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. Audrey covered her with a blanket and then did something she rarely allowed herself. She cried. Deep, wrenching sobs of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. For 2 years, she'd been fighting Tucker's custody attempts alone. For 2 months, she'd been job hunting with growing desperation. For 3 weeks, she'd been without insurance, rationing medication, terrified of what would happen if she got sick. And then her 9-year-old daughter had walked into a CEO's office and somehow, impossibly, everything had changed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Griffin's personal number, which he'd given her at the hospital. Checking in. "How are you both doing?" Audrey stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "We're okay. Shaken but safe. Thank you doesn't begin to cover what you did today." His response came quickly. "You don't have to thank me. Just show up Friday, and let's build something extraordinary together." Audrey found herself smiling through her tears. "I'll be there." And Mr. Caldwell? I won't let you down. You already haven't. Get some rest. Big day Friday. As Audrey set down her phone, she looked at her sleeping daughter, Kennedy, who was brave enough to fight for her mother. Kennedy, who'd somehow found the one person in the world willing to see past circumstances to potential. We're going to be okay, she whispered to her sleeping child. We're finally going to be okay. Friday arrived with Seattle's typical autumn rain, but for Audrey and Kennedy, the day felt bright with possibility. Audrey dressed in her navy suit, the one she'd been saving for important occasions. Kennedy helped her pick out jewelry and insisted on braiding her mother's hair because it looks professional but also pretty. They took the bus together to Apex, Kennedy chattering nervously about everything and nothing. Mom, what if you get so nervous you forget your presentation? What if Mr. Caldwell changed his mind? What if? Kennedy. Audrey took her daughter's hands. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Okay. Kennedy took a deep breath. Together. They walked into the Apex lobby, and this time Patricia greeted them with a warm smile. Ms. Brennan, Kennedy, welcome back. Mr. Caldwell is expecting you. She handed Kennedy a visitor badge that said Junior Consultant, which made Kennedy giggle. Rachel met them at the elevator. Ms. Brennan, it's wonderful to meet you properly. She shook Audrey's hand. Kennedy's told me so much about you. And Kennedy, your office is ready if you'd like to work on homework while your mom is in the interview. Can I sit in? Kennedy asked hopefully. I promise I'll be really quiet. Actually, Griffin said, appearing from his office. I'd like Kennedy to attend if you're comfortable with that, Ms. Brennan. She's already familiar with your work, and I value her perspective. Audrey blinked, surprised. You want my 9-year-old in the job interview? I want the team that created the presentation in the room, Griffin clarified. That team appears to be you and Kennedy. Kennedy bounced on her toes excitedly. Mom, he called us a team. Audrey found herself laughing. All right then. Team Brennan is ready. The interview was unlike any Audrey had ever experienced. Griffin asked thoughtful questions about her design philosophy, her approach to accessibility, her vision for inclusive technology. Audrey presented her work with growing confidence, walking through case studies and portfolio pieces. And Kennedy, true to her word, sat quietly but engaged, occasionally offering insights that made both adults pause and consider. Your approach to accessible design isn't just technically proficient, Griffin said after Audrey finished her presentation. It's philosophically grounded in genuine empathy. You're not designing for users. You're designing for people. That's always been my goal, Audrey confirmed. Technology should serve everyone, not just the able-bodied majority. Which is exactly the perspective Apex needs. Griffin slid a contract across his desk. This is my offer. Audrey scanned the document, and her breath caught. The salary was 30% above what she'd been making at TechFlow. The benefits package included comprehensive health insurance covering pre-existing conditions, for weeks paid vacation, and something called flexible family forward arrangements. What are flexible family forward arrangements? She asked. If Kennedy is sick, you work from home or take the day without it counting against you, Griffin explained. If she has a school event, you adjust your hours. If there's an emergency, family comes first. Period. Audrey's eyes filled with tears. I've been to 8 interviews in 2 months. Every single one expressed concern about my availability as a single mother. You're offering me flexibility as a benefit? I'm offering you what every employee deserves. Griffin's tone was firm. The recognition that having a family doesn't make you less committed to your work. It makes you more efficient because you're not constantly stressed about the impossible choice between career and child. Kennedy reached for her mother's hand. Mom, he gets it. He actually gets it. Audrey read through the contract carefully, her legal training from years of reviewing vendor agreements kicking in. Everything was not just fair, but generous. Almost too generous. Mr. Caldwell, this is an exceptional offer. But I have to ask, why? Why go so far for someone you barely know? Griffin was quiet for a moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. The silver frame was worn from handling. He turned it toward Audrey and Kennedy. The photo showed a beautiful woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, holding a small child with the same eyes. This was my fiancée, Madison, Griffin said quietly. And this was our daughter, Sophia. 7 years ago, they died in a car accident. Audrey's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Madison was brilliant. She had a master's in education and revolutionary ideas about childhood learning development. Griffin's voice was rough with old grief. After Sophia was born, she tried to return to work. She applied to dozens of positions, all of them below her qualification level. Every single one rejected her because she had a toddler and needed flexibility. His fingers traced the edge of the photo frame. She was driving to her 17th interview when a truck crossed the median. They died instantly. Both of them. Kennedy's eyes were huge with tears. That's so sad. For 7 years, I blamed myself for not supporting her enough, Griffin continued. For being too focused on building Apex to see how much she was struggling. For failing to protect them. He looked up at Audrey and Kennedy. Then Kennedy walked into my lobby and reminded me what courage looks like. And you reminded me of Madison. Brilliant, capable, and systematically rejected for having the audacity to be a mother. His jaw tightened. I can't fix what happened to Madison, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to other women. Other families. Starting with yours. Audrey was crying openly now. Mr. Caldwell, I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the position. Griffin's slight smile was hopeful. Say you'll help me transform not just Apex, but the industry. Say you'll give me a chance to do this right. Kennedy looked at her mother with shining eyes. Say yes, Mom. Please say yes. Audrey picked up the pen, her hand shaking slightly, and signed the contract. Yes. Absolutely yes. As Griffin countersigned, making it official, Kennedy let out a whoop of joy. We did it, Mom. You got the job. We did it. Audrey agreed, pulling Kennedy into a hug. Then she extended her hand to Griffin. Thank you for seeing past our circumstances to our potential. I promise you won't regret this. I already know I won't, Griffin said, shaking her hand. Welcome to Apex, Ms. Brennan. Can I show Mom her office? Kennedy asked eagerly. Rachel showed me yesterday, and it's so cool. As Kennedy dragged Audrey down the hallway, chattering about the view and the desk, and how there was space for Kennedy to do homework if needed, Griffin watched them go. Rachel appeared at his elbow. You know the board is going to have questions about this hire. Let them question, Griffin said. The metrics will prove the decision was sound. And if the metrics take a while to manifest, then they'll have to trust my judgment. Griffin's tone was firm. This is the right thing, Rachel. For Apex and for them. Rachel smiled knowingly. And for you? Griffin didn't answer directly. But for the first time in 7 years, when he looked at the photo of Madison and Sophia, he didn't feel only grief. He felt purpose. Over the next 6 months, Audrey Brennan proved every bit as brilliant as her portfolio promised. Her accessibility initiative transformed Apex's product line, catching the attention of industry leaders and disability advocacy groups. The company received 2 prestigious innovation awards directly attributable to her work. Client satisfaction scores increased by 23%. Revenue from previously underserved markets grew by 47%. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't the most significant change at Apex Digital Solutions. The culture was transforming. Audrey's flexible work arrangement had been formalized into a pilot program. 5 other employees with children were selected to participate, and the results were remarkable. Productivity increased by an average of 19%. Employee retention improved. Sick day usage actually decreased because parents weren't pushing through illness for fear of being seen as unreliable. Kennedy's after-school presence had evolved into a full program. The empty office next to Griffin's suite became a supervised study space where employees' children could safely stay while their parents finished work. 3 college students were hired as tutors and supervisors. The program was nicknamed The Bridge, and it became one of Apex's most beloved benefits. And Griffin Caldwell, the CEO once known as the machine for his cold efficiency, was smiling. Actually smiling. Laughing, even. He left the office before 7 most evenings. He attended Kennedy's science fair and sat in the front row beaming with pride as she explained her project on renewable energy. He took Audrey and Kennedy to dinner twice a week, ostensibly to discuss projects, but really just enjoying their company. He taught Kennedy to play chess and discovered she had a strategic mind that would serve her well in any field she chose. The office gossip was relentless. Rachel fielded questions daily about the CEO's relationship with the new hire and her daughter. But Griffin didn't care about gossip. For the first time since losing Madison and Sophia, he was happy. James Whitfield, Apex's CFO and Griffin's oldest friend, finally confronted him about it over drinks one evening. Alex, you need to be careful. Griffin raised an eyebrow. Careful about what? About getting too attached. James's expression was concerned. You've known Audrey for 6 months. Kennedy for the same. You're spending more time with them than you spend at the office. Is that a problem? Griffin's tone cooled. Audrey's performance is exceptional. The numbers prove it. I'm not questioning her performance. James leaned forward. I'm questioning your emotional state. You've gone from complete isolation to playing house with a ready-made family. What happens when reality sets in? What reality would that be? That they're not Madison and Sophia. James said it gently but firmly. That you're trying to heal old wounds by inserting yourself into their lives. Alex, I love you like a brother, but this has disaster written all over it unless you're very, very careful. Griffin stared into his drink. You think I don't know they're not Madison and Sophia? You think I'm that delusional? I think you're lonely, James said quietly. I think you've been grieving for 7 years with no one to share it with. And I think Audrey and Kennedy walked into your life and filled a void you didn't know you could fill. But what happens if you lose them too? What happens if this doesn't work out? You'll be destroyed. Or, Griffin said quietly, what if it does work out? What if this is my second chance? James sighed. Just promise me you'll be careful. With your heart and theirs. I promise, Griffin said. Though if he was honest, he knew it was already too late for careful. He was already in love with them. Both of them. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love. He just hadn't admitted it out loud yet. The shift happened on a Tuesday evening in March, 6 months after Kennedy's first visit to Apex. Griffin had stayed late helping Kennedy with a particularly difficult science project while Audrey finished a client presentation. At some point, Audrey joined them, perching on the edge of the desk and offering suggestions. The three of them worked together naturally, easily, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. When Kennedy finally solved the problem, she threw her hands up in victory. I did it. I finally got the chemical equation to balance. Audrey hugged her daughter, laughing. I told you you'd figure it out. You're brilliant, baby. And Griffin, watching them, felt his heart constrict with longing so powerful it physically hurt. This was what he wanted. Not just success or wealth or professional recognition. This warmth, this connection, this family. Griffin? Audrey's voice pulled him back. You okay? You look pale. He realized he'd been staring at her. At the way the desk lamp highlighted the auburn in her hair. At the laugh lines around her eyes. At the strength in her smile despite everything she'd survived. I'm fine, he lied. But Audrey had grown to know him too well. After Kennedy was engrossed in her book, Audrey followed Griffin to his office. What's wrong? She asked quietly, closing the door behind her. Griffin stood at his window, looking out at the Seattle lights. Nothing's wrong. Everything is exactly right. And that terrifies me. Audrey moved to stand beside him. Talk to me. For 7 years, I've lived in the past. Griffin's voice was rough. Building Apex as a monument to what I'd lost rather than as a foundation for something new. He turned to face her. You and Kennedy reminded me that life continues. That there can be second chances if we're brave enough to take them. Audrey's breath caught. Griffin, I'm in love with you, he interrupted. I'm in love with Kennedy. I'm in love with this makeshift family we've built. LT. And I'm terrified that if I admit it, if I reach for it, everything will be torn away like it was before. The confession hung between them like spun glass, beautiful and fragile. Audrey's eyes filled with tears. 7 years ago, my husband died in a car accident. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer while raising a 5-year-old alone. 2 months ago, I thought I might lose custody of my daughter. She stepped closer. I understand fear, Griffin. I understand building walls to survive. But I also understand that walls eventually become prisons. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm terrified too. Her voice broke. I'm saying that falling in love with my impossibly kind, secretly soft-hearted, wonderful boss is probably the worst professional decision I could make. Griffin's heart stopped. Falling in love? Past tense. Already fallen. Audrey's smile was tremulous but real. Probably around the time you showed up at the hospital and paid my medical bills without blinking. Definitely by the time you destroyed Tucker's custody claim. Audrey, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. Kennedy asked me last week if you were going to be her new dad, and I realized that she's already attached to you, that we've both already built our lives around you being in them, that if you disappeared tomorrow, we'd be devastated. I'm not going anywhere, Griffin said fiercely, closing the distance between them. Promise? Her voice broke on the word. Instead of answering, Griffin kissed her. It was gentle and desperate and terrifying and perfect. It tasted like second chances and hard-won hope. When they broke apart, both were crying. I promise, Griffin whispered against her forehead. I promise I'm not going anywhere. I promise to fight my fear every single day if it means I get to keep you. The office door burst open, and Kennedy stood there, eyes wide. Are you guys kissing? Audrey and Griffin sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Kennedy's face split into the biggest grin imaginable. Does this mean Griffin's going to be my dad? Audrey opened her mouth, closed it, looked helplessly at Griffin. Griffin knelt to Kennedy's level. Would you want that? Are you kidding? Kennedy launched herself at him, nearly knocking him over. You're basically already my dad. You help with my homework and come to my school stuff and make Mom smile all the time. Over Kennedy's head, Griffin met Audrey's eyes. In them, he saw his own mixture of terror and joy reflected back. Then yes, he said, hugging Kennedy tight. I'd like very much to be your dad. If your mom agrees. Audrey knelt beside them, joining the embrace. On one condition. Griffin raised an eyebrow. What's that? You have to propose properly. Kennedy's been planning weddings for her stuffed animals since she was 6. She has standards. Kennedy pulled back, suddenly serious. She's right. There should be flowers and a speech and a ring. Mom deserves that. Griffin laughed, the deep, genuine laugh that had become more frequent in recent months. Then I guess I have some planning to do. 3 months later, on a clear June evening, Griffin rented the Seattle Aquarium after hours. He filled it with fairy lights and Audrey's favorite white roses. Kennedy was his co-conspirator, leading Audrey through the darkened exhibits on a special project review that turned out to be a trail of photographs. Each photo told a story. Audrey and Kennedy laughing over takeout in their apartment. Kennedy asleep on Griffin's office couch, a blanket he'd carefully tucked around her. The three of them at the summer company picnic, covered in ice cream and joy. Audrey building sandcastles with Kennedy at Alki Beach, while Griffin watched from under an umbrella, his expression soft with love. The trail ended at the underwater viewing tunnel, where Kennedy waited with a velvet box and a brilliant smile. Mom, Griffin has something to ask you. Griffin took Audrey's shaking hands in his. 9 months ago, a brave little girl walked into my office and reminded me that life doesn't stop just because we're scared of being hurt. She reminded me that love is worth the risk. He knelt, and Audrey's hands flew to her mouth. Audrey Brennan, you and Kennedy have given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. A family, a future, a reason to leave work before midnight. That earned a watery laugh. I love you both more than I knew was possible to love. Will you marry me? Kennedy thrust the ring box into his hands helpfully, bouncing on her toes. Audrey was crying too hard to speak. She nodded frantically, pulling Griffin to his feet and kissing him while Kennedy cheered, and the jellyfish drifted serenely behind them, illuminated in shades of blue and purple. Yes, Audrey finally managed. Yes, yes, yes. Griffin slid the ring onto her finger. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and strong and beautiful like the woman wearing it. Kennedy inserted herself between them, hugging both. We're going to be a real family now. We've been a real family for a while now, sweetheart, Audrey said, kissing her daughter's head. This just makes it official. 1 year after Kennedy Brennan walked into Apex Digital Solutions with her mother's portfolio and a desperate hope, the wedding took place. The ceremony was small, just 100 guests overlooking Puget Sound. Kennedy served as both flower girl and best person, taking her duties with utmost seriousness. She'd helped pick the flowers, approve the menu, and insisted on a chocolate fountain because every good party has chocolate. But the most meaningful moment came during the reception, when Griffin took the microphone for his toast. Most people here know the official story. Brilliant designer gets hired at Apex, impresses everyone, wins awards, transforms our product line. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the guests. What you might not know is that Audrey's interview was conducted by her 9-year-old daughter, who took it upon herself to show up in her mother's place when Audrey was hospitalized. Gasps and surprised laughter filled the room. Griffin found Kennedy in the crowd, now 10 and beaming in her junior bridesmaid dress. "Kennedy, would you come up here?" She bounded to the stage, and Griffin knelt to her level. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago." The room fell silent. "Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to show up when everyone else would have turned back. Thank you for reminding a scared, lonely man that walls don't keep you safe, they just keep you alone. Thank you for sharing your mom with me." Kennedy threw her arms around his neck. "You're welcome, Dad." The single word, Dad, said so naturally as if it had always belonged to him, shattered the last of Griffin's careful composure. He hugged her tight, not caring that 100 guests were watching him cry. When he composed himself enough to continue, he stood with Kennedy's hand in his and reached for Audrey's hand with the other. "A year ago, I thought I had everything I needed. A successful company, professional respect, financial security. What I didn't realize was that I had nothing that actually mattered." He looked at his new wife and daughter. "These two showed me the difference between building a life and living one." He raised his glass. "To Kennedy, who taught me that courage sometimes means showing up when you're terrified. To Audrey, who taught me that second chances are real. And to the unexpected family we've built together, the greatest success story of my life." As the guests toasted and applauded, Kennedy tugged on Griffin's sleeve. "Dad, I have something to tell you too." "What's that, sweetheart?" She grinned. "You know how you helped Mom with her presentation that first day? And how it was so good that Apex changed everything?" "Yes, I helped her make it." Kennedy's eyes sparkled with mischief. "She was so sick that night, but I knew the ideas because she'd taught me. So I helped put the slides together and check the numbers." Griffin stared at his daughter, then at Audrey, who was trying not to laugh. "You're telling me that my company's award-winning accessibility redesign was partially created by a 9-year-old? 10 now," Kennedy corrected. "And yeah, pretty much." Griffin started laughing. Deep, uncontrollable laughter that spread through the room, even though most people didn't understand the joke. When he could finally breathe again, he scooped Kennedy into his arms and pulled Audrey close. "Remind me to put you on the payroll." "I already asked Rachel about that," Kennedy replied seriously. "She said there are child labor laws. But I negotiated for increased allowance instead." Audrey shook her head, smiling. "She's been negotiating since she could talk. You'll have your hands full." Griffin looked at his family. His wife, brilliant and strong and brave. His daughter, sharp and funny and kind. And he felt his heart fill with something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Peace, joy, home. "I wouldn't have it any other way," he said. 5 years later, on a rainy October afternoon, Kennedy Brennan Caldwell stood at a podium in the newly opened Brennan Caldwell Innovation Center. At 15, she'd already been offered early admission to MIT for computer science, though she'd deferred to finish high school with her friends. The center was a state-of-the-art facility funded by Griffin and named for the family that had changed everything. Today's event was the official launch of the Kennedy Brennan Scholarship Fund, providing full college scholarships for children of single parents. 5 years ago, Kennedy began, addressing the room full of industry leaders and press. "I did something really stupid and really brave. I went to a job interview instead of my mom." Laughter rippled through the audience. "I did it because I was scared. Scared my mom wouldn't get the job. Scared we'd lose our apartment. Scared that being a single parent made her less valuable to companies, even though she was brilliant." Audrey, sitting in the front row beside Griffin, wiped her eyes. "What I didn't know was that walking into this building would change everything. Not just for my family, but for thousands of families like ours." Kennedy pulled up a slide showing statistics. Employee retention rates up 87%. Productivity increased by 43%. Parent satisfaction scores at unprecedented highs. But numbers aren't the real story. The real story is about how one person's decision to care, to really see people instead of just employees, created a ripple effect that changed lives. She looked directly at Griffin. "My dad taught me that real leadership isn't about being the smartest or the richest or the most powerful. It's about being brave enough to care, even when caring is scary." Griffin's throat tightened. He reached for Audrey's hand. "So today, I'm announcing the Kennedy Brennan Scholarship Fund. full college scholarships for children of single parents, funded by the Caldwell Family Foundation. Because every kid deserves a chance, whether their parent can show up to the interview or not. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Later, as the crowd mingled and celebrated, Griffin found Kennedy standing alone by the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. "That was quite a speech," he said, joining her. "I meant every word." Kennedy leaned against him. "You know what's weird?" "What's that?" "I barely remember my biological dad. I was only 4 when he died." She looked up at Griffin. "But I remember every single day since you became my dad. Every homework session, every science fair, every time you chose us over a meeting." Griffin's eyes burned. "Kennedy, I know everyone calls it a miracle, what happened when I showed up at your office that day. But I think the real miracle was that you said yes. You didn't have to help us. But you did. And you kept helping, every single day. You saved me too," Griffin said quietly. "I was living half a life, scared to feel anything because I'd lost someone I loved. You and your mom taught me that love is worth the risk." Kennedy hugged him tight. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart." Across the room, Audrey watched her husband and daughter silhouetted against the Seattle skyline and felt gratitude swell so powerfully it took her breath away. 5 years ago, she'd been a desperate single mother, struggling to survive, convinced that the world had no place for someone like her. Too complicated, too risky, too much. Now she had a career she loved, a husband who cherished her, a daughter thriving beyond anything she'd imagined possible. All because a 10-year-old girl had been brave enough to show up. All because a lonely CEO had been brave enough to care. All because sometimes, the most important interviews of our lives don't happen when we expect them. They happen in moments of crisis and courage, when strangers become family, and when showing up, despite fear, despite impossibility, despite every reason to turn back, changes absolutely everything. Kennedy turned from the window, pulling Griffin back toward the celebration. "Come on, Dad. Mom's about to cut the cake, and you know she'll give you grief if you miss the photo op." Griffin laughed, letting his daughter lead him back to his wife, back to the family they'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. The family that had taught him the most important lesson of all, that sometimes miracles don't come in the form we expect. Sometimes they come in rain-dampened dresses and scuffed sneakers. Sometimes they come carrying portfolios and promises and hope against all odds. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we're brave enough to say yes when miracles knock on our door. Now let me tell you something before we wrap up this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage can change everything, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear that miracles are real. Subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep bringing you stories that remind you what's possible when ordinary people do extraordinary things. And drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part of this story hit you hardest. Or just say I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline. I want to know this message is reaching people all over the world. People who need to remember that showing up, even when you're terrified, can change everything. Because Kennedy's story isn't just about a little girl and a job interview. It's about refusing to give up. It's about choosing courage over comfort. It's about believing that somewhere out there, someone is waiting to say yes to your impossible request, if you're just brave enough to ask. So whatever impossible thing you're facing today, whatever mountain seems too high to climb, remember Kennedy Brennan standing in that lobby with her mother's portfolio, choosing bravery over fear. Remember Griffin Caldwell, choosing to open his heart again despite the risk of loss. Remember Audrey Brennan, choosing to let herself be helped, to let herself be loved, to let herself believe in second chances. And then ask yourself, what would happen if I was brave today? What would happen if I showed up, even though I'm terrified? What miracle might be waiting on the other side of courage? Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Keep showing up. Keep being brave. Because somewhere out there, someone's life is about to change forever. And it might just start with you. I'm Mr. Hearthline, and I'll see you in the next story.